Sam, regarding, because I mean, the pandemic measures, they've had a very strong impact on society. Um, like for people that don't realize what is the collateral damage and how far it reaches, could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, let's start with a small study I worked upon with a few other colleagues when I was still working officially, and other colleagues from other universities. We made an analysis, a risk benefit and a cost benefit analysis solely for Belgium. It's a small example, and we looked at the first 57 days of the first wave total lockdown, and we looked into psychological, psychosocial, mental well-being of the population, and we came to the conclusion that within the 57 days we lost 77,000 healthy life years, and it would cost our government 4.3 billion euros just to set in course psychological support for the rising amount of anxiety, depressions, post-traumatic stress syndrome, etc. That's just a very small example. In the meantime, we have international studies have been published in Nature and the Lancet last month, looking in the mental state of the worldwide population. And certainly within the youth and adolescents, we see a rise of approximately 50% in anxiety disorders, mental stress, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and 38% rise in suicide attempts under 25.
I've recently seen, I don't know how accurate it was because I can't recall it clearly, but I think I've seen the suicide rates of adolescents was actually, the deaths coming from suicides was actually higher than the infection caused by COVID. Do you know anything about that?
That's what we assume.
Yeah,
Yes, at this point in time, that's what we assume. Yeah.
right.
And it doesn't look good because, and that's what worries me the most. I have children myself. My son is 18, my daughter is 17, and I see my daughter gliding away uh, mentally for the last year.
Mm,
She can't. She let's say that every form of um, resilience is gone. I went out with her about 3 weeks ago. We went into the city, face masks on, social distancing, all the rules, just to get her out of our little bubble she's in. And after 20 minutes, my son said to me, "Look at Emma, which is my daughter," and she was just frozen on the floor, and she couldn't move anymore, and she was pale white. And I asked what happens, and she said, "I want to go home now. I can't bear being in an open environment." So she was developing agoraphobia, fear of coming into open places. So I
mm.
had to put her in the car and drive back home. So what we are doing, you have to know, in an adolescent age, neurological, in your brain, you are during your puberty, you are creating a lot of neural networks. And those neural networks in your limbical system are the systems that create your social patterns for the rest of your life. And when you're 15, 16, 17, you should be able to go out, have a date, kiss your first girlfriend or boyfriend. That's the start of developing social relationships, developing of learning what socially works and doesn't work. And all these things are being taken away from the youth now. So I project within 20 years, we will have a huge amount of mental issues once these people, these youngsters now, in 20 years, are adults of 40 years. I think we will see a lot of psychotic behavior. We will see a lot of um,
Fear.
fear, schizophrenic fear, bipolarity. We will see enormous rises. The influence that this has on kids now is detrimental for the future. Even more, there has been a study now, published also in last month, looking at little babies. So most governments enforce wearing face masks for parents when their baby is born. So what researchers did was look after 8 months to a year, look at the babies and see how they respond to the natural face of their parents. So when the parents take off the face mask, the children are in total distress because they are unable to recognize the face of their own parents. They don't have any mimical connection anymore. You have a mimic like smiling, being happy, being sad. Babies from 0 to 1 year old are unable to communicate. The only way to communicate for them is by crying, being happy, and they also have to learn to recognize this from their parents. They don't recognize this anymore.
So what you're saying about teenagers and forming neural networks, that's one thing, but like we're talking about the smallest life form here. And so their brains, they even need to develop more than teenagers. So like I have no idea what the consequences of that in the
I don't want to
future will
think
be.
about it. Yes.
Yeah,
So this is just a mental part. Oxfam did a study projecting 360 million youngsters in the world will come into poverty in the next year, amongst which 20 million will probably die of hunger.
oh,
So I'm not sure where we're heading with this crisis, or what. This is complete insanity. If you look at a worldwide level, we have reached 3 million COVID deaths. Those are the official numbers. Just to give you an idea, 57% of the Belgian COVID deaths are probable COVID deaths. They have never been tested on COVID. They are being written away as COVID. So I guess worldwide, a lot of people who died have been written away in the data as COVID patients without having been died for as a COVID. We have some small case studies here in Belgium, ranging from 28% to 66% of the people being admitted to hospital deceased on a COVID department that didn't die from COVID but from their underlying diseases. So if you take this into account, let's say 25% worldwide wasn't a real COVID case. From the 3 million, it diminishes like hell. So we lose about 65 million people a year, mostly on cardiovascular, diabetic, or other lifestyle diseases that are induced by our environment in which we live. Cars, NOx emissions from cars, processed food we eat, junk food we eat, Coca-Cola we drink. The thing is, societal, the main question is, what do we want as a society? Do we want to try to obtain a zero risk, or are we still able to cope with life? Are we still able to cope with death? And are we still able to see death as part of life? Because if we want to be consequent and you want to crush the virus, which we can't do at all, this will remain amongst us, become endemical like influenza. But this is a societal debate we have to really put forward, because if we want to be consequent, then we have to stop McDonald's, then we have to stop all the producers of processed food, which develops cancer in people. You should ban all cigarettes out of the world. You have to stop driving cars, motorcycles that pollute the air, of which we get lung diseases. So if we are 65 million people a year die of these diseases. So are we going to do that as well?
Mm.
Are
Yeah,
we
you're
then are we that consequent that we do this as well?
yeah,
Or
and
do we take the collateral damage as a part of life that's just part of our society, and we just know that this happens and we all bear some kind of risk? We can cross the street and get run over. Are we willing to still accept that risk?
Listen to the entire episode of the Immunity Podcast.
link in the description below.